Hello and welcome to our listeners and viewers. This is Radio Entrepreneurs. I am your host, Phil Sharkey of my company, The Higher Authority, and I have the great pleasure to speak again with Marc Zeckenbaum, who is a returning guest of ours. He's Marc of Marc Z Legal Staffing, and this is the Marc Z moment. Marc, I'm thrilled to have you back on again and look forward to our conversation. How are you today?
Hi, Phil. Great to be on the show, and as always, having some conversation with you.
Sounds perfect, Marc. So what do you have cooking today? What's happening out there in the legal world for
So
yourself?
one great question, Phil. So one of the things that you and I have talked about in the past, as far as a hiring process, is the interview itself and the scheduling of the interview. And what we're finding as you and I talk about our business being like labs for our listeners, is that what we're finding lately, it's very difficult in terms of scheduling candidates and employers to the point that employers or candidates are walking away from interviews that can't be scheduled. And so what I wanted to share with employers and prospective employees are, with the employers obviously understanding that some candidates just are overly scheduled, or it's challenging for them to do traditional times and to schedule traditional times, or it's challenging for employers with people they want to meet in terms of candidates want to meet, that to find the right times. So what the employers need to do is, when they're interviewing, to find that balance to accommodate the key interviewers in their schedules, but accommodate the prospective employee in their schedule. And the employer needs to maybe give a little bit. So some of the people they want to interview the prospective employee, it just may not be a reality. That person who has a family that they can't get onto the Zoom, or they can't meet the person in a certain time. Maybe they just can't be part of the hiring process. But obviously, at the same time, if you're a prospective employee, you have to say, if I'm going to be considered, or I want to be considered for a position, I
Right.
have to realize I'm going to have to take some time to do that. I'm going to have an interview after 9 o'clock sometimes, or after 8 o'clock sometimes, in order to meet the key people of the employer that I'm interested in. Or I'm going to
Yeah.
have to do something during the day that I normally wouldn't, or find a solution to that, because this is an employer I'm potentially investing in, and I want to meet them, and this is the best they can do. So it has to be that balance of scheduling. And all of a sudden, we're seeing issues with employers or prospective employees walking away from interviews, employers losing potentially good candidates, and candidates losing potentially good opportunities with employers.
Yeah, Marc, have you seen, as you mentioned, I think the key word that I heard there was balance. And I've seen such a switch in my lifetime in business, where you used to be scheduled and the employer had all the upper hand. And if you weren't there, you're showing me you don't want the job and I'm not interested. Now there seems to be a lot more adaptability on both sides, where with schedules, and employers, as you mentioned, really could lose a good candidate if they can't be flexible to their schedule, and vice versa. It seems like, especially even in our Zoom meeting right here, the adaptability of people is much more in play than it used to be even several years ago.
Correct. And it's really becoming challenging, because absolutely you have a job to do when you're interviewing for a position, while you're interviewing for a position. At the same time, you have to realize that you're going to have to make a time sacrifice in some cases, because of just in terms of the accommodation of different people's schedules, because there's usually for a job. At the same time, at some point, employers have to realize that it's at one stage, or a certain stage, that
Right.
they have to maybe accommodate the employee. And it may be that one of the people they ideally want to be in the interview process just can't do it. So, for example, we have a client that they have a key partner that is always traveling. So what they've done is they've worked it out that that employer, that person that's a key part of the hiring process, the partner, that person will maybe come in to the interview by Zoom while the
Right.
others meet in person, but at least that person can be part of it. Or what they'll do is they'll have a full Zoom initially at a certain time that's an accommodation for everybody. And then once it gets to a certain point for in-person, then they find a time that both the employer, prospective employer, and employee can agree on. But it's definitely been challenging, especially the level of position. It gets more and more challenging, and we're in a very busy business world where the person who's interviewing has obligations. And at the same time, the people that are interviewing have obligations, and they not only are interviewing you, but they have their job. So it's that balance that I know specifically in this market that employers and employees have to accommodate.
And have you seen that change, Mark? Has it come to fruition? Do you see it being successful for a successful type of company and entrepreneurs, or are some still stuck in that? Well, I can't really make it work if you can't meet me at this time. Well, I guess what's the percentage of that you see out there of successful companies?
I'm hopeful. I mean, we're just seeing it more. Again, prospective candidates and prospective employers, for the most part, are doing their best possible to accommodate candidates, and candidates are understanding that there's only so far they can go about getting accommodated. But there's situations more so now than we've ever seen where employers or employees are walking away. The employee can't get scheduled within their times, or they're not hearing from the employer. They're walking away, prospective employees. Employers, they find that the prospective employee is not willing to accommodate their schedule, they're walking away. So we're seeing more of a trend of that happening,
Yeah.
but in a tight marketplace. But at the same time, for the most part, employers are really doing everything they can to accommodate the employee, because they understand the future employee, because they understand their schedules can be very difficult.
Yeah, it seems very much that the pendulum has swung where, the prospective employee is really interviewing these companies as much as the companies are interviewing them. And they're looking for a union more so than, I really want to work for you and I want to show you my best side. There's sort of that feeling out process, if I'm sort of reading what you're saying, and that balance between the employer and the employee.
Right. And it's a very important for the prospective employee to really meet the key people, to see if there's chemistry, to see if they're on the same page, and as well as the prospective employer representatives, because they want them part of the process. And so it is a balance that there's got to be some give. And in some cases, you're going to have a situation where one party or the other is going to walk away because just there's only so much time that can be accommodated. But if you really want a position, or you really want a particular employee, you have to figure a way to accommodate it. It may be in the evening, it may be on the weekends, but it's worth it. I mean, we've done that. We've suggested that to our clients. And at the same time, we've done that as we've interviewed people for our company. It's very difficult for them during the day. And so we've made an accommodation. We've interviewed people in the evenings,
Sure.
or significantly before work. It's something you just have to do.
Mark, do you still see the process going through several levels where I always wonder, is doing the background screen when I get the background, are you still seeing like an initial contact, maybe a recruiter contact, the first level, and then they step through multiple interviews with different parties within the company?
Yes, we're seeing that first initial screen, and then multiple interviews, or whether the multiple interviews happen on the second round where they meet, let's see, the candidate meets multiple people, or they meet some key people in the second round and then a final round. But it's usually 3 steps in terms of the hiring process, at least 3 steps. Some have significantly more, but at least 3 steps, because it's important to make sure that there is a fit. And in some cases, with the process, if it happened too quickly during the COVID process, where people had to make some decisions, whether on the employee side or the employer side, and later on, they found we made the wrong decision. So employers are really trying to make the best decision possible. And prospective employees want to have multiple interviews. Some have said to us, after, in terms of prospective employees, is there going to be another round? Because I'd really like to meet more people. So that's why it's usually 3 rounds. in some way.
Yep, sounds
At
good,
least
Mark.
one road.
Listen, I want to remind everyone we've been speaking with Marc Zeckenbaum. He is the president of Marc Z Legal Staffing. So, Mark, tell our listeners here if they're looking to get in touch with you, as always, how would they go about doing that?
Well, first of all, they'll go on our wonderful Radio Entrepreneurs website, radioentrepreneurs.com, marczlegal.com, MarczLegal.com, Google Marc Z, M-A-R-C, and the letter Z, or 617-338-1300.
Sounds great, Mark. Thanks again for the time. It's always interesting with the information you bring. I find it very informational. And I want to remind everyone this has been Radio Entrepreneurs. Thank you so much for listening.